I fucked up somewhere. Like along the way, something that I did either triggered someone, like why did this happen? Dude, don't fucking do what I did. I work in an industry where like everybody has an ego. I deal with so many people on the other side of the transaction that I'm like, how do these people even get this client? Like this must be a terrible experience for these people on the other side of the deal. So I think it's selfish of me to not want to build this business. So what I needed to do was say, okay, well, where are my weaknesses right now? Like I'm a great salesperson not because I'm like super salesy, but because I truly do care about understanding people's needs and wants and what their end goals are, and understanding how do I build a relationship with you to get there. Like that, I can teach people. And so what I realized my biggest weaknesses are
problems are what? Problems are profits!
Welcome to the Problems or Profits podcast. I'm your host, Matt McKeever.
And I'm your host, Rebecca Lynn Matheson.
And in today's episode, we'll be sitting down and chatting with Emma Pace. Emma's a realtor that's absolutely crushing it in Toronto and really looking forward to just diving deeper into the evolution of her journey as a realtor and salesperson, as well as really starting to build a business. I've known Emma for the last couple of years and just really excited to jump into this episode and break down some of her backstory, some of the problems she's encountered and how she's been able to overcome them.
And chicken nuggets. All right, guys, for those of you just listening in for the first time, the idea of Problems or Profits is how you can go from taking any sort of circumstance that you're thrown at in life and turning that into a positive or a profit. So today we have the wonderful and absolute competitive killer Emma Pace on today's episode. And Emma, we're just going to start with a few warm-up questions. We normally go for 3, but I'm going to add in a 4th today. And start off with, why chicken nuggets?
I've always loved chicken nuggets since I've been a kid. They're just, I don't know, just one of my favorite foods, remind me of home. And I feel like everyone, unless you're vegetarian, pretty much gets down with them.
Awesome. And so that's obviously a reference to Emma's Instagram bio for anyone that's interested. And our first official warm-up question here is, what's the most expensive thing you've ever broken?
Ooh, the most expensive thing I've ever broken. It's a tough one. I think like electronics, something like that. But I think if we look kind of past the material items, I think the most expensive thing I've ever broken was like my mindset for a short duration of time, because that really was the thing that cost me the most money. So material items, I mean, there's been several things. I mean, car accidents or whatever the situation is where you've got to pay for like larger things out of pocket, or real estate things that happen. I didn't necessarily break them, but they were at my expense. And those things are probably, tens of thousands of dollars or whatever they happen to be. But like in the grand scheme of things, I think getting kind of beat up out there in the market and not being on top of my game is probably the biggest expense to me at some point.
Absolutely. I love that. And the focus on mindset, that's one thing that you just can't replace and can't afford not to really focus on. So that's awesome that you highlighted that. Now, next question is, if you had $1 million and only 24 hours to use or spend that $1 million, what would you do with it?
I would do something with my family. I would, if I could get everybody together in the same room and take them out to do something fun, that's probably what I would do. I mean, if I only had 24 hours with it, you don't have too much time to invest. Yeah, I can put it away, but I'd rather have fun with my family and take them to do something good.
Awesome. And our third warm-up question, why are you?
I am me because of my surroundings. I think I am who I am as a human being because of my family and friends that I grew up with, like in London and stuff. I know I'm here in Toronto and I have this very aggressive attitude or whatever, but who I am at my core is just like a classic kid that came from Byron, you know what I mean? So I think who I am is a result of my family and my friends from my childhood, but I also think that's kind of my core, my nucleus of who I am. And then I layer on top all the other awesome people who have had influence in my life, like you, Matt, you know what I mean? Like we have networked with other people to create kind of who we are in today's world, but we're ever evolving and changing people. I think who I am in my nucleus, or however you say it, is just like a kid from Byron.
Awesome. Love it. And so, Emma, I'm, relatively familiar with your background, but for people that are new to the podcast, new to your story, you're crushing it as a Toronto real estate agent, but it wasn't really a clear A to B path. It's not like, or at least to the best of my knowledge, you didn't grow up dreaming of being a realtor.
No, no, not at all. I think I didn't really have a clear set path at any point in time in my life. I was always someone who was trying to think outside of the box to make income. I never wanted to really, I never really wanted to work for somebody else. I was always trying to be a little bit more strategic and creative in terms of how I could accomplish things or get things done. But I started DJing, which was, brings me kind of to one of those streams. And that was kind of a, fun sort of passion project that turned into something that was a paying gig that brought me to Toronto. And then I was working for Enterprise Rent-A-Car at the time. It was taking up too much of my time. So I decided to get my real estate license to provide me a little bit more freedom and space in the DJ world. And then, this is my passion project now, and it's something that's kind of stuck with me, which is fantastic. So it all kind of came full circle. And I think, at the end of the day, it's not, do I want to be a real estate agent? Do I want to be a realtor? No, I think at the beginning it was great for the money, but my real focus is like, I don't want to be a salesperson. I want to be a business owner. And so this has been just one of the stepping stones to allow me to become who I'm going to be in the future. And it's like, I don't want to be a real estate agent forever. I'm not going to lie to you guys. The income is great, and it's taught me a lot, and I've been through a lot of ups and downs as a result of it. So I'm very thankful for it, but it's definitely not my end goal, I don't think.
Gotcha. And so, I think my audience, or the audience behind Problems or Profits, is generally young, ambitious, hungry. When do you decide it's the right time to pivot? When did you decide was the right time to pivot and move from London to Toronto? And when did you, how did you know it was the right time to really pivot and make that hard decision? Because I think that's a hard decision to decide to kind of pause something you're passionate about to then go chase after something that's going to be far more profitable. Yeah.
I mean, honestly, man, I think just you have to take a leap of faith at some point in time. You have to, one thing that I've learned now, and I feel like I just turned 30 this year, right? And I feel that from 25 to 30, I really have become a very different person. And based on what you just said, I think a lot of the viewers of this particular podcast are probably going to be 20 to kind of 40. I feel like the 25 to 30 age gap for me really taught me a lot about myself. And I just kind of needed to assess, I've made several, don't get me wrong, I've made some bad decisions in my life, but the bulk of the decisions that I've made leading me up to this point have been great decisions. I have to trust my gut, and I have to trust that I'm going to take a leap of faith. This is on me. This is not on anybody else. So is this a risk for me to move from London to Toronto? Dude, I was shitting my pants when I moved. I was like, how am I going to afford $900 a month in rent? It's impossible. Toronto's ridiculously expensive. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make any financial sense. I can stay with my parents and save money and all this kind of stuff. But what is that getting me? I'm not happy. This is really what I want to do. I have to take this leap of faith. I need to make this happen for myself. And that was the same thing when I left Enterprise to do the real estate thing. I had no connections. I didn't know one person who had enough money to buy a house in Toronto, that's for sure. But what I knew is that I did not take the first leap of faith to move from London to go to Toronto to work for Enterprise Rent-A-Car. I did it because I wanted more time to myself to do DJing. That was my passion project. It would be wrong of me to not take the next leap of faith. Otherwise, I just came to Toronto for no reason, right? So, and I understand, I'm comfortable with the decision that I made, and I need to trust myself to make the next decision. Over the course of my life, the majority of the decisions that I have made have led me to where I am, and I feel like I'm in a good spot. I got to continue with that role, understand my risk versus rewards, and you have to trust your gut, take that leap of faith, and then work your ass off to make sure that it's been worth it to take that chance.
And how long does it take you to actually make the leap of faith? Like, do you take into consideration this decision for days, weeks, months, years? Like, how long were you sitting on the fence before you jumped? Do you make a pro and cons list? Like, how do you decide when's the right time?
Yeah, so I think I do make a pros and cons list for a lot of this, like a lot of the bigger decisions that I make in my life. I will say, what is the risk reward ratio for me here? I think I have been someone who has dealt with analysis paralysis a lot in my life, like probably more so than the average bear. I will say that. And fortunately, I have a great network. Mitt has brought this to my attention many times. He's like, you have too much analysis paralysis, just kind of go for it, right? But I think earlier, in my early 20s, it took me a lot longer to make a decision because I just wasn't as comfortable with my decision making, with the positivity ratio of my decision making, where now it's like, I don't think that I have to take as long to make a decision because I trust my gut and I trust my patterns of making good decisions. It doesn't take me as long as it did. But if this is the first time that somebody who's listening to this podcast is making a big decision, don't make the jump too quickly. Really go through it. And if you have, similar to real estate investing, plan A, plan B, and plan C, and understand that you're going to hope for the best and prepare for the worst, but you have an exit strategy, not about real estate, but anything in your life. Just understand what the plan of action is, and you have to be comfortable with the end result in any regard, but hoping for a certain one. And I think most of the time, if you're the type of person to go through all of those steps and understand that, you'll probably get to the outcome that you're looking for because you'll figure out a way to friggin' make it happen. But you have to be comfortable with any of the, A, B, or C options that could come as a result of your decision making.
Now, you're the type of person, and I can just tell by the way that you're talking, that you just, once you get your mind set on something, you will make it happen. And when you transitioned from being a DJ to being in real estate, what did you do to make it happen? Because you mentioned, you didn't have any connections. You were small town from London in the big city in Toronto. Now what? Like, what are the steps that you take to actually become now that top performer at Zoocasa? And what did you do to actually ensure that you were driving towards that success?
Well, I understood that the statistics are that 80% of people who get their real estate license will fail within 3 years, right? So what I thought was like, if I can just get myself to that 3-year mark of not failing, I'm already way beyond where everybody else is. And I think the likelihood of me succeeding, if I could pass that threshold, is probably pretty high. So forget the next 25 years. I got a 3-year track ahead of me. That's like really my end goal. Like, how do I pass 3 years, right? So I thought, how am I gonna put food on the table? I had a goal. Like, I wanted to hit 6 figures in my first year. That was like, I thought if I could hit 6 figures in my first year, like nobody that I knew had ever done that. You know what I mean? Like, I never grew up around anybody who had like a ton of money or anything like that. So I thought I would be the shit if I made 6 figures, like that would be my dream. So I set that target. And I just said, okay, well, even if I don't meet that target, it's okay, because I'm still going to make more money than I did at Enterprise. I still have my time, and I'm learning a lot from this experience. And so I just honestly made a plan-by-plan action of like, okay, how do I not go broke here? And that was through, okay, well, I know I can do leases. Like, I can at least figure out how to lease apartments to people. Like, that's okay. Like, I'll figure that out. That'll be my bread and butter. I can always fall back on that. It's not like a tremendous amount of money, but I can pay the bills off it at least, right? So that's my baseline. And then from there, how do I build the connections? Because like, that's great, but that's not really the space that I want to play in. I want to play in, I want to start selling stuff. So I use that as my benchmark. That kept food on the table. I did that for a couple months, and I was like, okay, cool. Like, if this is what I have to fall back on, I know that I can make money doing this. So now I've hit that baseline, right? First sale ended up being a lease that I converted to a buyer, because one thing that I think is like super interesting is you get way more information, like financial information about tenants than I do about buyers or sellers. Like, I don't get any information when someone signs up to like buy a house with me, right? But if I go to lease something, they're like credit check, letter of employment that was dated yesterday, like all of this kind of stuff, right? Some people are like, I'll give you my savings account information so that they know that I have first and last month's rent. And this guy came through and I was like, why the hell are you renting a property, dude? With the money that you have saved, we can actually figure out a way for you not to spend as much money as you would on this rental and own a place. And he was like, really? I don't know anything about it. I've never even thought about that. And so I said, well, would you at least be open to having a conversation? And he was like, sure, like no one's ever mentioned it to me before. That's how I got my first sale, right? Just by being creative in that regard. But then I thought, like, how many lease people am I gonna have to go through and like pull teeth or do this analysis? There has to be like an easier way to do this. And then that's kind of how I found Zoocasa. They were looking to onboard buyer's agents and just people who were willing to basically grind it out and take a lower split, but they would give me all the leads. And I didn't have any money, like I didn't have any savings or money for lead generation or marketing or anything like that. So I thought, this is my easiest leverage point to get me to the next spot. I don't need to go, I've never been a person that needs to go right to the end. I always just want to get like one step ahead. And then when I get there, I'll get one step ahead from there, and that will lead me to the end, right?
Awesome. Yeah, I really love that. So where's the, like, we kind of talk about that sometimes at some of my education events, like hop theory, right? Like just jumping from one hop to the next rather than trying to make these giant leaps.
Yeah.
Or another thing I sometimes think of is just-in-time information, right? Or just-in-time knowledge. Far too often people want to figure out everything rather than going and getting started. Yeah. So you mentioned at the start of the podcast that you now really want to transition from realtor to business owner. Yeah. So what are you doing now to really set yourself up for success there?
Yeah, so I think one thing that a lot of people, I mean, as investors, we're like decent with money, but we're always like trying to save money, right? Like as investors, it's like we want the highest possible returns, we want to save money, all this kind of stuff. I feel like you, Mitt and Pearson, have an advantage as CPAs because you understand things from like a balance sheet perspective. For me, I'm like, I don't friggin' know how to read like a balance sheet. Like, what the hell is this? So what I needed to do was say, okay, well, where are my weaknesses right now? Like, I'm a great salesperson not because I'm like super salesy, but because I truly do care about understanding people's needs and wants and what their end goals are, and understanding how do I build a relationship with you to get there. Like that, I can teach people. And so what I realized my biggest weaknesses are, I can't clone myself and be a million places at once, right? But if I can get someone to 80% of my capabilities, we're going to actually be able to help way more people. I'm going to be able to scale my business, and I'm actually going to be able to help people in the GTA have a great realtor, because I deal with so many people on the other side of the transaction that I'm like, how do these people even get this client? Like this must be a terrible experience for these people on the other side of the deal. So I think it's selfish of me to not want to build this business and not be able to train other people and that kind of thing. So the two things that I realized was, I don't have a good team. I'm not a good leader right now, and I don't know how to train. So what I need to do is I need to figure that out. That's my weakness right now. It's very easy for us as human beings to get comfortable and to want to just hammer in on the things that we're like really, really good at, right? For me to go out and do a buyer consultation and show properties, like I know I'm going to get the sale. That's okay. But is that actually leading me to where I want to go? And that's to be a business owner, to be able to have more leverage and more time to myself, but to be able to scale my business as well. And like it's physically impossible to do that in our industry unless you take a step back and analyze, what do I actually really need to work on? And so for me, that was training. And that was also, I have also been crippled by being spoiled from Zoocasa with them spending the marketing. Like I said earlier, I didn't have any money to spend on marketing or anything like that. And as a result of that, it's hindered me as a business owner because I was scared to spend money on my business because I never had to spend money on my business, right? And so it took a little bit of like internal reflection to be like, dude, you have to take the leap of faith again and spend money on your business. And if you burn money, it's okay. Like you have to figure this out, because if you don't, you're never going to grow. So for me, like the two things that I've really been focusing on is, okay, well, how do I find the highest and best use of investing my money in my business to help grow, and what's the highest and best use of my time to help my team become better people so that we can provide excellent customer service and scale as well.
And what is the end game for you in the next 3 years? So I really liked that you highlighted, when you first got it, it was like, all right, 3 years, like this is the sprint, this is what I need to get to.
Yeah.
Like, what does that look like for you now? What is that 3-year marker where you're like, this is it, this is what I need to get to, and then I'm gonna like be good with this business?
Yeah, funnily enough, the end goal for me right now, it's kind of come full circle. Like when I first started, it was like a financial thing, and now I feel like I've hit most of the financial goals that I want, and now I need to get my life back. And so my 3-year goal is to move back to London at some point so that we can start a family. Like that really is the most important thing for me at this point in time. But me being me, I understand that for me just to make the move back to London and try and start over, that's just going to stress me out. Like that's, I can do it. Like I know I can do it, but I need to set myself up on a plan of action. So the goal is over the next, hopefully 12 months to really build a solid foundation here in Toronto so that we can still grow and maintain our business in Toronto, and then come back to London from a personal lifestyle perspective, but then also grow a small team in London as well so that we can manage kind of both markets, and I can kind of oversee the team on both.
Awesome. So Emma, I'd love to hear, like, what's a current problem or obstacle that you're currently encountering in your business that maybe you haven't quite turned into a profit yet, or you're in the process of trying to transform into a profit or a real opportunity?
Yeah, I think, I feel like everything is starting to come to a head now. I feel like what's happened to me over the last 6 months is I've spent a lot of time and money investing into my team. And I think like over the last 3 months, I was kind of like, when are the results going to come? You know what I mean? Like we're human beings. So it's like, we want that instantaneous gratification. Like when I order shit on Amazon now, it's like, if it doesn't come within 24 hours, I'm like, what the hell's going on here? Right? So as human beings, we want to like put in a bit of effort and see results immediately. I think that is my biggest challenge mentally, is just, you have to get around that in business. Like if we're going to be in this for the long term, like, you're going to see all these guys on YouTube or whatever it is where they're like, make $1 million in like 10 days. It's like, it doesn't work like that. Like if you plant seeds, sure, some people get lucky and whatever, and I'm sure there's good opportunities out there, but you do have to plant seeds and you have to work on yourself. And for me, the biggest challenge to get a return is just investing time and energy and understanding that, with hiring my phone guy or paying for leads or whatever, you're not going to get an immediate return. Sometimes it's going to take 3 or 4 months to really see the fruits of your labor. And I'm starting to see that now. And it's been, 4 to 6 months since I kind of started that journey. So I think that was a challenge, but I feel like that's something that I'm starting to get over. But is it it's not as much of a challenge as it is really like a mindset shift, I think. And
so like any tips, or like how do you get patience? Like how do you buy patience for yourself?
I wasn't quick to make a decision on the person that I hired in this role. I was very slow to make that decision because I wanted to find the right person. And I understand that we're putting in the work and he's doing the work every day, and I'm auditing his work, and I know that like everything we're doing the right actions. Like I understand that. It's not like we're lazy. It's not like I'm not training him or anything like that. So you just have to trust in, I am putting in the work, and I know that the results will come. And I know that from my previous decisions and when I started in real estate. I had to hustle my ass off with like no results for the first little bit, right? And I know that if I continue to do the right actions every single day, at some point in time, I'm going to look back and be like, I can't believe I was nervous for like 3 months. Like, and I'm going to say, I can't believe I did business without having these guys on my team before.
Mm-hmm. So right. Like a big part of it is like tracking data then, to kind of like knowing that like, hey, we are, even if we're not seeing the needle move today, we know that we're putting in the efforts that should eventually drive that. 100%.
And I know like Adam talks a lot about lead and lag measures. I'm big on that too. Like I track all of my main things. So for instance, in like the real estate business, I track how many leads came in every week, how many appointments did we set, how many appointments did we actually conduct, because you have to also understand, like, we're not perfect. We're not going to bat. We're not going to go and hit every appointment that we set. Some people are going to cancel, right? So it's, okay, well, how many appointments did we set? How many did we actually conduct? Of the ones that we actually conducted, how many of those people are we actually converting into clients? And how many of those people are actually buying, right? And you got to understand that, like, this isn't a linear process. I wish real estate was linear, just like this. Like, sometimes it's like this and sometimes it's like this, and you have to understand that you need to learn to love the ride. And that's part of the challenge of this whole thing, is like really being able to control and understand your mindset, because I'm able to enjoy and understand the ride now, but at the beginning of my career, this shit used to stress me out. Like I would lose sleep all the time, being like, am I gonna get this deal? Is this person gonna sign this paperwork? Like, why did they send the DocuSign back? You know what I mean? You're like, oh my God. And now I'm like, look, I've been doing this for 6 years. It's gonna come through. Like, it's gonna be fine. As long as we track our numbers and we know that we're doing everything. Some weeks we smash it out of the park and we're at like double our goals. And some weeks we come through and we're like, what happened last week, guys? And it's like, look, we tried our best and we didn't meet those marks. And as a leader, it's really easy to be like, oh, one person on our team didn't hit their goals and everybody else did this week. It's like, everybody has a shit week, man. Honestly, it's okay. As long as everybody shows up every day and does their best, with the understanding that there is some variance. People are gonna have bad days. People are gonna have better days where I produce twice as much as I typically would. And you just kind of got to take that in. As long as you're showing up and giving your best and the best that you've got that day, like, you're going to be fine. Like, it'll be fine.
Absolutely. Now, one thing that I want to highlight here, Emma, with you is that you've actually gone from working more in your business to now working on the business and trying to work on your leadership skills. So for someone who's switching from that role of really being in the business and being the sole worker there, how do you then grow to develop your leadership skills? And instead of using mentorship, you're now becoming the mentor for others. So what's that transition like for other people who are maybe looking to grow and evolve their business?
Yeah, it's challenging. Like, I'm not gonna lie, it has been a really big, like, it's been a challenging thing for me. But I think, to go back to your point, just because you are becoming the mentor now, or you're becoming a leader, does not mean that you still shouldn't seek that out as you continue to grow, because there's always going to be someone ahead of you. So I personally have a coach. I'm also like very heavily invested in reading and learning more about how do I become a better leader. Like, I know Adam's super into Jocko. I read all of Jocko's books too, because I feel like they're very like, you can implement a lot of the stuff that he puts in his books. Like, they're very implementable and actionable type of items. And I think it's just one of these things where you also have to give it your best at bat and understand that, like, it's okay. Like, I'm gonna make mistakes as a leader. Like, it's gonna happen, because this is the first time I'm doing it. It's like the same thing when I first started in real estate. Like, I wasn't nearly as good of an agent as I am now, but I learned from my mistakes. And I've learned how to deal with people, and that's kind of what I'm learning as I'm kind of on my journey now. But I think it's also understanding, like, my personality. It's like, oh, well, if someone doesn't do something up to my standard, if I'm like kind of upset about that inside, I'm like, that's just my ego. I need to let that go, and I need to understand, why didn't this person do this? Okay, how do I train you on how to do this better? Or did I miss something? Am I not training you well and you have a better way of doing this? So I think it's challenging, but I think it's also just, you have to kind of take it day by day, and you need to understand that, like, you have to do some self-reflection and understanding what you could be doing better as well.
Absolutely. I really like that you've highlighted the continual mentorship along the way. I think there's so much value in actually seeking out that mentorship, because you can just compress so much time. Like, for me, I transitioned from fitness into real estate, and I would not have nearly the amount of knowledge that I have in the industry had I not, worked with mentors like Adam and Matt. So for you then, in transitioning as a business owner, you highlighted Jocko, which I freaking love Jocko. Like, so many golden nuggets Are there any others that you've been really like listening to a lot lately for that kind of leadership mentality piece?
I think one guy that I mean, obviously Gary Vee, you'll listen to him just for like motivation and all that kind of stuff. Ryan Serhant, I've read all of his books, just from like a real estate agent perspective, type of thing. But one thing that I'm like really trying to dissect is how do I train my guys in the most efficient manner? And I think not necessarily from a leadership perspective. I think Jocko gets a lot of the points across. I'm like, you know, how do you handle people and how do you structure certain things? But for me, I also really like I went to school for psychology. So I also like the psychological aspect of how do people learn best? So there's a guy named Jim Quick, and I've read his book. I don't know if you've obviously checked it out. So I fall back on his stuff, not for leadership, but just for learning, because I think to be a great leader, you need to understand how your team learns. And if you can figure out little hacks or different ways to get them to understand things quicker, it's so much more accomplishing. Like my guy that's on the phone, it's really challenging when you've never been in real estate before to go and like book appointments with people and have to have these conversations. And so there was like a 3-week stint there where he was like, man, I feel like the needle is not moving forward. And I'm like, no, I can hear your conversations. You're doing the right things. And we implement or tweak 1 or 2 other things to help him learn a little bit better. And he gets his first appointment. He comes in here and he's freaking out because he's so pumped about it, right? And it's how can I as a leader implement certain little things to help people learn quicker so that they can have those instantaneous wins and become more committed on the team kind of thing, right? So I think there's like the leadership strategy, but I also think there is like the how to be a better teacher as well, because people really do need to grasp the concepts of what you're teaching.
Yeah, I really appreciate you breaking that down for us, Emma. I'd love to explore, was there ever like a biggest problem or almost a breaking point where you almost quit on the journey? And if so, and I honestly think there probably is, because almost everyone's experienced it at some point. If so, you know, how did you overcome that, or what was the difference?
Yeah, so quite honestly, there was. I got into a very bad partnership when it came to one of the properties that I had invested in, and it got pretty nasty at the end. And not because of the property, because of the partnership, right? And so it had me questioning there, like, should I be investing in real estate? You know what I mean? Like there was the part of me to be like, is this the end of my journey? You know? And I think we beat ourselves up, and like negative emotions will always take over positive emotions. You know what I mean? Like, I'm sure you've probably gone through it, Matt. It's like some trolls leave some bullshit comment on your video.
Yeah.
This partnership that I got into, these guys just really got inside my head, and I was like, okay, again, back to my decision-making patterns. Let's break this down to understand, like, should I be out of this game, or like where did I fuck up here? What got me to this point of me thinking about this in my head, right? Because 6 months ago, this was a great idea. So what the hell happened, right? And so I went through it, and I was like, okay, well, let's think about this. Was this the wrong property? No, everything that, and I found the property, I helped to, you know what I mean? Like I kind of brought this to the wrong partners, and I trusted in the wrong partners. They didn't have the knowledge or experience. They were just friends, right? And that was really that's where things went wrong. And so I was like, okay, well, did I choose the wrong property? No. Was the ARV correct? Yes. So everything about the property, the reason why we got into it was right, and I brought that forth, okay? So that was cool. When things started to go south, why did they start to go south? Do I truly feel that I like heard this person out and tried to understand things from their side? I do. Do I feel like they maybe didn't do the same to me? Yeah, they weren't on the same level of like self-reflection that I was at that point in time. So I kept going through it, and I was like, look, at the end of the day, this wasn't a property fault. This wasn't you not knowing what you're doing. This came to I wasn't able to come to reasonable terms with someone because they didn't want to come to reasonable terms with me. And there's nothing that I can do about that. And I just have to accept the fact that some people are not going to, like, you can't force someone to feel a certain way on how you want them to feel, right? And so unfortunately, we weren't able to come to the agreement that I was hoping that we would, but I'm not going to beat myself up about it because I understand what got me to that point. And I would be a fool if I did it again, but I'm not going to do it again because I burned myself. So if I do it again in the future, is that going to lead me to be like, should I exit the game? Yeah, but I got burned so bad in that experience. I learned so much about it. And I basically took that from it. It's like, look, this was like going through hell and back, this experience, but I did make the right decision on the property, which means that I'm not stupid when it comes to investing. The property was still good. Like the foundation of this whole partnership was still right. But what did I learn from this? I learned that I made a mistake when I vetted my partner, and I'm going to take ownership for that, right? I did everything I possibly could to come to a resolution, and that didn't happen to work because they weren't looking for that. And that's okay because that's outside of my control. So did I do everything in my control to get me out of this situation? And in the end, was I able to, even though it took me longer and more stress than I expected it to, was I able to get myself out of this situation in a positive manner, still make money and move on with my life? And, my wife was involved and stuff like that. It's like, it made our relationship stronger. So all of this stuff, I look back and I say, yeah, there was one shitty thing that happened. And of course that shitty thing is going to take over all the other emotions. But when I look at the big picture of what it was, there's so many different takeaways and shit that I learned from this that it would be selfish of me again not to move on, because now I can teach you guys about this and other people, like, dude, don't fucking do what I did. Like, you know what I mean? If I just exit and I just kind of like turtle and I leave, nobody else gets to learn anything except for me just being a little bit of a baby because I made a bad decision.
Whew. Getting chills, Emma. No, that was so sick. Like, the way that you've actually broken that down is so incredible for the audience here, because like, you've taken this super sour situation where you had someone who was not interested in a positive outcome here, and you've just completely flipped it and taken ownership over every last bit of that interaction. So, and that's something that I really want to highlight, because that is an incredible thing to do that not everyone has the ability to, because you've actually like really broken it down in a way where you're taking ownership over the interactions. You're taking ownership over literally every single piece of that. And there's this amazing quote from Marie Forleo that I love. It's, I win or I learn. And this is one of those moments where you definitely learned, and you were able to now like just go forward so much stronger. Yeah. So I just want to highlight like how actually incredible that is, that you were able to have that reflection, because that level of reflection is not easy to get to. So have you always done that? Like, is that how you break down these problematic moments, or when did you actually learn to do that? I think that, no, I used to like, I don't want to say I have a bad temper, but I have a short fuse, we'll say, right? Like I feel like when something happens to me, I'll get like my emotions take over, right? And I think it's one of these things where I believe it was like I watched the Drake video, and he was saying like, his mom always told him, if something happens to you and you're pissed off, you got to wait 3 days before you respond to it. And my dad has always kind of told me the same thing, like, just take a walk and like cool off, but it's easier said than done. And then I think when you start to, like, I burned myself in the past. Like, you say stupid shit early, and then 2 days later, you're like, why did I say that, right? And I think that's just part of growing up. But also you have to like, cognizantly think about these things with their life, and they're like, why does this bad shit keep happening to me? Why does this keep happening to me? And it's like, well, let's just analyze and break down what exactly happened here, okay? Like, and it only takes 2 or 3 times for you to assess the situation to understand that, like, I fucked up somewhere, like, along the way. Something that I did either triggered someone, like, why did this happen? And as much as like our egos often get in the way,
It's like you have to realize that when you start to internally reflect on certain things that have happened and understand like, hey, like I might not agree with how you feel, but that doesn't change the way that doesn't change the fact that you feel that way. I don't have to agree with it, but I can't make you change how you feel. It's just one of these, sorry, I'm going off on a bit of a tangent here, but it's you need to understand that you do have to take ownership for your own actions. Like you had said, Rebecca, I think when I started to actually do that, I could see the person on the other side of whatever the situation is, let their guard down and be like, I respect the fact that you took ownership for this. I'm going to do the same. Let's move on, right? But sometimes you have to be the person to initiate that, to let things go. And that comes back from like us as egotistical people because we don't want to be wrong. But when you realize that sometimes we are wrong, and it's okay if you tell people that, dude, I fucked up, I'm sorry. Most people will be like, okay, I respect the fact that you told me that. I fucked up too. Let's move on, right? So I think it's just really hard to go through that the first couple times. But when you actually do it and you see the results of what come through it, you think about that all the time because you're like, I know I can get past this in most situations if I just assess what was the root of the problem. Was I involved? Like maybe I was the root of the problem for some reason. Let me take ownership of my shit or figure out what happened. And I need to be the leader to like move this forth instead of holding grudges with people for no reason.
Awesome. Yeah, I think that's great, Emma. And just really want to reiterate for people at home as well. I do think a big part of it is first, like trying to take that locus of control and really try and find a way that it was your fault. And I think it's important to also understand that with time and experience, I think a lot of us grow to realize that our reality isn't the prime reality or the only reality out there, and that oftentimes a lot of miscommunications come just from, you know, a lack of communication or people being forced to interpret actions rather than being explicitly told the logic behind it or the reasoning for it. So oftentimes the exact same results can happen, but exactly how it was communicated will completely change how it's interpreted by the other party.
I could not agree more, man. I feel like people just have a really hard time, like I don't know how much you guys talk about like egos and stuff like that. Like I work in an industry where like everybody has an ego.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to, and I'm like, dude, I do too, 100% I do. But I need to keep it in check if I want to be successful because, you know, if a client says something to me that I don't necessarily agree with, it's like, are they attacking me or are they just upset for some particular reason where I need to like not email them back. I need to call them and say, okay, look, I can tell that you're upset about this. It's okay. I understand. Let's clear the air. I want to understand what happened here. Why are you upset? And it's like, because of X, Y, and Z. Okay, cool. You came across this way, but that's not actually what the situation is now that you've explained it to me. Let me resolve this. Like we decided to work together for a reason. So let me take this away and figure out how I can resolve this problem for you. And then most people are like, oh shit, like most people would not do that. You've gone 10 steps ahead of everybody else. And that's kind of how I think that's how you build good relationships with people, just by taking that ownership and figuring out like, how do I be the party in this, how do I be the party in this bad situation that is the one to kind of get the ball rolling and move forward?
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. And I think you've highlighted, you know, hit the nail on the head once again with like, not everyone will do this and not everyone will like do the work to actually learn, to reflect. They won't do the work to further or better themselves. And those are the people who stay stagnant. But you have gone on such a progressive pathway where you clearly recognize that like in order to grow, in order to move forward, like you have to do those things that will make you the best. Like I love that you've highlighted that. So
but selfishly for the people who, because I think a lot of people are out there and it's like still like, fuck that, this other person did something to me and like screw that person. There's also the selfish part about it where like you can go to sleep at night not being bitter because you're like, dude, if you don't accept what I put out there, that's now on you. That's not on me. You know what I mean? Like, so don't get me wrong. in most situations will move things forward by being the bigger person and doing the self-reflection. But in the situation where it was like that person did not want to agree with me, I could at least go to sleep at night being like, I made myself whole on this. You know what I mean? Like, I don't have to be bitter at myself to in 10 years think back, could I have done something? Like, I did everything I possibly could. I'm gonna go to sleep. I'm gonna move on with my life tomorrow.
Awesome. Love it. And I think that's a great spot to wrap it up, Emma. So really appreciate you jumping on the Problems or Profits podcast. If people want to follow along with you on your journey, can they? And where can they?
Yeah, 100%. So easiest place to reach me is on Instagram, which is at Pace of Base. But you can also connect with me at connectwithemma.com. All my contact information is on there, and I would be happy to connect with you.
Awesome. Emma, thank you so much for joining the Problems or Profits podcast. It was a killer episode, and Kate cannot wait actually to listen back to this one because there were just so many golden nuggets, and you've really absolutely crushed it on your journey. And it sounds like you've got a lot of big things to come. So can't wait to see what happens next.
Thanks, guys. I appreciate you having me on. It's been a blast.
Problems are what? Problems are profits!